This is Evolve CPG, a community of purpose-driven, sustainable product brand leaders who not only believe in better, but actively pursue it. I'm your host, Gage Mitchell, and today we're speaking with Rob Sinclair, founder of Conscious Brands, whose assessment tool can help guide you on your journey towards positive impact for people, organizations, and the planet.
A nice warm welcome to everybody. I'm Rob Sinclair from Conscious Brands and have Mr. Gage Mitchell here interviewing me today. It's exciting. Is that how the
Yeah, thanks for having me on my show, Rob. I appreciate it. It's always good to chat. But seriously, thanks for coming on. I've been wanting to share with the world more about your Conscious Brands assessment tool and just help people understand what a conscious brand is. But before we get there, I want to dive a little bit more into your background, because you are one of my friends that seems to have lived like 1,000 different lives, a bunch of different businesses and careers and stuff. So can you walk us through a little bit more about kind of your business background from, your computer company days to food brands to being a consultant?
Yeah. When you said that, Gage, I thought you were talking about, the physical background behind me. I was like, I have a story about these speakers. All these business books I found at a garage sale or little free library to make me look smart. So
yeah, you haven't actually read any of them, of course.
No.
That makes sense.
I don't want to. It's kind of like comic book collecting. I don't want to impact the resale value of them, right? You want to
got to keep them mint.
Got to keep them mint. Yeah. Still looking for the plastic covers, but yeah, my background it's kind of interesting even to me. And I guess it, I just have always had this knack for wanting to do things a little bit differently, I don't know if it's like, I see something that is different or I see something that can be different and I just kind of shift it. And I guess, it started probably if I go way back, it was probably the early days of me being a paper boy. And
What?
I think it was my mom's excuse to get me out of the house after school each day for an hour so she could have some peace and quiet.
Nice.
But
did you do it on a bike delivery papers?
No, I had a little red Henry Express wagon. And
oh, nice.
And I went, right from my house. I was fortunate that it was an after school paper route. And I went right from my house all the way up the street, down and, 3 blocks, and within an hour is done. And nice. It just, I guess there's a couple things going back to that. When I reflect on it, it just allowed me time to think and process. So I'm very much an introvert, although, when we're at conferences, I definitely have that extroverted energy, but I need to go inside to get my charge. So going back, it's probably the paper route that allowed me to buy my first computer, that allowed me to set up a little arcade in my basement. Because, I used to hack games and crack games and stuff and put them on my computer. Yeah. And this is like an old Apple II. So just as, people would go and spend $2 or $3 at the arcade. And I said, well, why don't you just come over to my house after school, after I do my paper route, and you can play video games and I'll charge you like 50 cents. And kids are trading me cool shit. And I was like, this is interesting. And then, fast forward into grade 12, I got a government grant to start a t-shirt company. I remember talking to the loans officer. It was my buddy, Jeremy, and I was going to talk to the loans officer, and I had, something like this just sketched out on a piece of paper with a little bit of design and saying, this is what we're thinking of doing. He's like, oh yeah, approved. I'm like, what?
What? Wow. So easiest loan ever.
Yeah, I know, right? Like $3,000 back in 1988, 89. And it was like one of the most fun summers I ever had. And we basically sold t-shirts out of the back of a van on roadsides around like fruit stands and stuff. And it was called Revolutions. And Revolutions, we thought we were so creative with our graphic design that on a typewriter, we typed the word revolution. And then since it's typewriter, you can do really circular. So you had to do it a box. So revolution across the top and then revolution backwards and then this way and this way. And our catch line was, it was time for a change. I mean, we're selling
Nice.
T-shirts. I don't know how much of a change that was, but we had our logo on it.
Hey, people have to change their shirt every once in a while.
Well, it's true, right? It's true. And we got into tie dyeing, and so what else were we going to do on the side of the road, selling these T-shirts, playing frisbee, and start tie dyeing them. So we set up a little tie dye section in the back of the van, and we're just hanging them out to dry. And this I don't know if it was a father or someone came by, and he's like, "Oh, I need like 15 tie dye shirts." We're like, great, we have 14. He's like, "Well, what about that one?" I was wearing it. I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure."
Wow.
So literally sold the T-shirt off my back, and
Nice.
yeah,
True entrepreneur right there.
True. Well, you got to do what it takes, right? And so that kind of morphed and evolved, and it just, I mean, we were 18. We had tons of orders, and we just didn't have any business acumen, any maturity at all, really. But we did really well. And that kind of, had a few different iterations. And the next real business was an internet company. And I remember I was helping a buddy. Well, it was an advertising company that turned into an internet company. But I was helping a buddy with a business plan, and I was in university at the time doing some bioscience, which apparently I wasn't that good at, because I got asked to take a semester off.
Nice.
It was a little humbling and humiliating. But and my buddy's like, "Well, what are you going to do?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "Well, you're going to come do this business with me?" Like, well, I guess I have some money saved up for university, so why not? So, nice. We started selling these kind of entertainment books, a coupon book type thing, which is very successful. Like, we printed about 75,000 of them over the course of a couple of years, and paper costs all of a sudden shot through the roof, and the internet was coming of age, and we weren't quite as large as the entertainment book, and the platinum dining and entertainment card ended up going virtually, right? So we set up an internet company. We had a fairly successful platform. It was called the Gold Guide, and it was basically like a Yellow Pages online. And we were getting about 30,000 unique hits a month. So this was back in like 94, 95. So HTML1 and Java.
When there were only 30,000 people on the internet at that time. So you were the original Google.
Oh man, I remember at a trade show I can't remember what type of trade show it was. It was a local one, so it wasn't anything significant. But we had to like cache all the pages and just to show how fast it was, because most people are on dial-up at that time still, right? And anyway, we scaled to about 30 employees and having way too much fun. And we ended up getting bought, which was pretty fun. But that scaled back, and then that scaled the size of the company back, because they wanted just the technology that we had. And we ended up going from this super fun, fairly relaxed, fairly 26-year-old energy office to downtown in one of the major oil and gas companies. So probably the A++ building. And we started doing IT outsourcing for oil and gas companies. And it was kind of at that time where I started to think that, it's funny because we're told, we should have expensive cars, expensive clothes, and just have this like lifestyle. And I had all that, and it wasn't really fulfilling. I kind of had this this illusion that that would make me happy, and it didn't. And my life was pretty cush. I would ride my bike or rollerblade into the office around 8:00, have a meeting, go work out, come back for a lunch meeting, because I was doing business development. I helped them grow the company, but I maybe come back from lunch, maybe not. And I had shifted my diet to be more vegan at the time, and entertaining a whole bunch of oil and gas folks at hockey games and golf trips on a vegan diet
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
it
didn't
just
have
didn't
the
work.
vegan hot dogs back then. Yeah.
Well, they didn't have vegan hot dogs, and you're kind of there's very much a culture, at least at that time. There's very much a culture of having to bring the party, and
Yeah.
there's not a substance to support that party when you're eating tofu and vegetables. So, so it kind of I'd finished my 2 years, or I was on the edge of finishing my 2-year commitment with the company, and I remember going out to the mountains. This was in November, and in my Volkswagen van, and it was a 1978 Volkswagen van, and I didn't have heat in it, and it was. I live up in Canada, in case that hasn't been mentioned. I live up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So drove up to the Rocky Mountains, and it was cold. Like, I had to wear full on snowsuit just to drive to this campground, and this campground had electricity, had a little plug-in heater, and I just took 4 days with I say no stimulants, and there weren't any stimulants. But what I mean is, like, no music, no books. I'm not really a coffee person, and I hadn't found mate yet. So really, I just had this like mini silent retreat, and did Tai Chi by the river every morning, and just got really clear on what it was that I enjoyed. And what came to be was, like, I really liked cooking, and at that time I was vegan, and it was new to me, and I really liked just tooling around in my Volkswagen. So this idea of vegan in a VW came to me. I was like, whoa, vegan in a VW, that rings. So I did some public speaking courses, took video editing, and that summer in '99, I hopped in my van and drove across North America producing this vegetarian cooking show called Vegan in a VW. And it was by far the funnest 6 months of my life.
Is it possible to still find episodes of that somewhere?
So this was before YouTube, and if you go to the Wayback, is it Wayback Machine, the archive of the internet, and you type in vegan and VW, you can find it. What was kind of funny is someone had, like, I let the domain go, and someone purchased the domain and pretty much took my story, talking about how I transitioned. Like, did that really happen?
They just replaced the actor. Yeah.
Kinda. But what that was a gateway for was educating myself around the natural products industry. So I met some really cool people. I'd roll into town, and I'd already talked to the local vegetarian societies and got them to set up interviews with radio stations and television, and also manufacturers, like who's doing this, like, vegan, vegetarian type of food. And so I just educated myself with it, and ended up in Boulder, Colorado, and met this person, Ron Pekarsky, who's a famous chef. And he had won the gold medal in the Culinary Olympics. And I had one of his cookbooks. I'm like, oh my God, I'm sitting down with Ron Pekarsky. And we just really clicked, and we were talking, and I said, yeah, like, what would it mean if I licensed your formulas? And he's like, yeah, it sounds cool. So I raised some money and licensed his formulas, brought them to Canada. I created a brand called Friendly Foods, and, got distribution into about 200 stores across Canada. And that was a little challenging in 2000, 2001, 2002, as I started to create a family. I had to choose being a dad or being a business person, and I chose being a dad, obviously, and sold Friendly Foods, and started to figure out what was next for my life. And while I was trying to take care of 2 young daughters, and I ended up just doing whatever it took. And I had some experience with bookkeeping and accounting, so I got some small little bookkeeping contracts. And I remember sitting, and I was also doing some brokering for a friend of mine, and she was repping some pretty cool brands, and some brands that I had known from my days at the trade shows before organic became crazy. And yeah, I remember sitting at my computer, looking out the window, reconciling bank statements, and this idea of conscious brands came to me. I was like, conscious brands, what is that? And I didn't know, but I trust my intuition, and I just knew enough to take the little money that I had and actually, register the domains, which is pretty cost effective, but also register the trademarks. Like I just knew that there was something there, and I needed to kind of commit in a very large way. And
how were you able to register the trademarks without any in-use application? Because normally they require some sort of evidence of you using it.
Yeah, I mean, I started to just say sustainability, right? Like I knew sustainability was going to have something to do with it. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
very, very smart of you.
Very smart of me. I know, right?
Which is
wise,
unusual.
I would say, actually. Yeah. I'd probably say wise. Yeah. But
that's better.
Yeah. And it was funny because it takes it took me anyways, a long time to admit the failure of business, right? The failure of losing, $300,000, my money and other people's money on this venture that was Friendly Foods. And what I gained was so much wisdom of business and so much wisdom of overextending yourself and being in integrity and all this stuff, right? And it's allowed.
So was it a failure or just really expensive education?
Well, I did go on the dean's vacation, so maybe this was the dean saying, "Welcome back. You've graduated. You have your master's in life now. You are a conscious brand. Mm-hmm. You as Rob, yeah." But anyway, yeah. So that just kind of brought me into conscious brands, and conscious brands. For the last, this would have been like 2005, 2006. So the last 15, 16 years, I've been just figuring out what a conscious brand is, and starting from this place of carbon, using carbon as a gateway to sustainability. So doing a lot, we did the first on-pack carbon label in North America. We worked with Carbon Trust, Whole Foods, and Method, and Kettle, and Guayaki was the company that had the carbon label. Just trying to figure out like a standard for North America, and it was just way ahead of its time. And even a carbon label today, I think would be more than people could comprehend. And we know how busy the package of food products are getting. They kind of look like NASCAR. And you as a brand guru, purpose-driven brand guru, know what it's like to fit 1% for the planet and B Corp and non-GMO and all these other certifications while still having the presence of that brand, right? It's a busy place. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so the carbon, it just wasn't where carbon needed to go. And nor did we want the conversation to just stop at carbon. We wanted the conversation to go beyond and into sustainability. And at that point, our purpose was activating sustainability. And we actually had a mission to help 1,000 brands transition or further thrive in the new economy by 2020. And you kind of know that part of the story, which I'm happy to, dive into, but it kind of allowed us to work in the natural product space in a really intentional way and get some amazing exposure and speaking engagements, and work with some really cool brands on helping them become better companies. Yeah.
And I think you were also doing B Corp consulting and stuff through that period as well, and running, like mastermind spiral table groups and a bunch of other very interesting things. So it's like sort of like Modern Species. It was a business with a bunch of like sub businesses packed within.
Well, the life of an entrepreneur. You just kind of, you always know there's another minimum viable product that you could put out, and it's one of the things that we see with emerging food brands, right? Like, oh, we could do these 17 different products and we have some need for this. And it's like, no, focus.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think the last, like I said, the last 15, 16 years is really been discovery of what Conscious Brands is as an organization and what a conscious brand actually is as a, as an entity. And, going back to the deeper why of why I started Conscious Brands was really, pardon me, was knowing that there was some shit going on in the world that didn't align with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was drawn towards sustainability, is because the world, I remember giving my family a homemade Christmas gift in 2007. And I'd kind of come back from Burning Man. I was working at Burning Man, like it was the Green Man that year. And we were helping them quantify the environmental footprint of Burning Man and some of the more progressive camps. And I remember putting on this calendar for my family this picture of the earth, and it said the earth is melting, go outside and see. And they're like, oh yeah, Rob, right? Yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
Just some sort of crazy idea that he has or whatever. But I really see that I saw, and I still see, and one of the reasons kind of Conscious Brands came to be, other than this, moment of clarity, was that there's a lot of shit going on. I mean, in the world today we can see, but back in 2007, I saw also a lot of shit going on. And I kind of attributed that to business, right? And businesses have, the majority have a fiduciary duty to maximize shareholder return. And sometimes that means externalizing the cost to the environment and to society, right? So in my mind, it's like, okay, if that's the problem, then, and business is the problem, then the solution isn't no business. The solution is business operating in a different way to kind of have a more holistic lens. And we have language for all this now, but at the time it was, like looking at all stakeholders. And at the same time, you talked about B Corp. At the same time, as we were actually doing sustainability strategy and carbon label for Guaki, they were helping to create the B Corp standard. So, I mean, we were right there, and we were, the fifth company in Canada when it finally came to Canada, and being a founding Canadian B Corp. And it all of a sudden gave language, right? I remember when we celebrated, in 2000, I think it was 2014 or 2015, 1,000 B Corps. And we're like, oh, this is so great. And, like it is like, it's amazing that now we have language and there's legislation and this movement. And it just took a committed group of people to look at business differently. And really, we use this as a bit of a platform for conversation and education. And this is how we, achieved our goal in 2020 of helping 1,000 brands transition or further thrive in the new economy, right? Was actually through all the work we did with B Lab and B Corps and the talks and everything that we did. And yep, our purpose was still activating sustainability. And I can't remember when the light bulb clicked for me, but sustainability just didn't seem to be enough, right? Like if we're just sustaining, and I use this example, Gage, and you've probably heard me use it quite a few times.
I love this one.
If someone asks me how my relationship is with my wife and I say it's sustainable, they're like, oh, is everything okay? Versus if I use something like regenerative, right? Like it's actually producing. And I think, where we are in the world right now, we're using 1.5 Earths to exist each year, right? Like we're going into a huge amount of ecological and social debt on an ongoing basis. So yeah, let's move towards sustainability and try to find that homeostasis. But how can we actually be regenerative? and how can we actually make the world better? And I think business can be that catalyst for positive change in the world, right? And our vision at Conscious Brands, or our purpose, is harmony. And we define harmony as a flourishing, responsive, regenerative society. So that's me, right? And that's what it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of answers the question too that I was going to say. And I'm not sure if this is partly where the light bulb of the name Conscious Brands came up, but I was thinking that, there's a conscious consumer out there that a lot of products and brands in our industry kind of go after, the people who are already aware of the concerns out there and wanting to help make a difference with their dollars. And then you kind of flip that into conscious brands. So I was going to ask you to define conscious brands. And I think what you just said helps. But I also like one of your statements that you use a lot, which is purpose on purpose. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah. So it's kind of our value proposition, right? Is your purpose on purpose as an organization? And what we're seeing, we're seeing kind of history repeats itself, but in different forms, right? It kind of shape shifts its way. And it, back in 2006, 7, 8, we saw, green was this big thing, and let's do this environmental stuff. And then we saw a lot of greenwashing, and companies getting pretty kind of slapped on the hand, or not pretty kind of, but slapped, because they're, we live in this age of transparency that I think people forget. So we, need to be in integrity and authentic with what we do. So we saw that in this whole greenwashing, and then we also started to see murmurs of this in sustainability, right? And sustainability, I won't call it washing, but it just got co-opted, right? The more holistic kind of natural step for systems constraints of sustainability is what we used, like a scientific definition. And it's not just about environment, right? It's not about changing light bulbs. And everyone, there's this huge migration from management consulting to sustainability consulting, and just using the same tools, right? And I'm getting to your question, or getting to answer your question. And, this was kind of part of the reason why the tool came to be, or the functionality and the value proposition of purpose on purpose, was that we're starting to see this with purpose now, that there's, I think it's something like Larry Fink from BlackRock Capital put some statement out that said purpose is, whatever, I have it somewhere, but purpose is just kind of that North Star that businesses need to follow. If you don't have purpose, you can't do it, right? And so somehow, 86% of companies have this stated purpose. We are this, we do this, da 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 da. And very few of them, I think it's under 20%, have an activated purpose. And it just makes it very, inauthentic. So what we want to do, and I think this is where the real opportunity is with our tool, and with this time that we're in right now, is you say you have a purpose. What is it? And is it actually on purpose? And do your staff, like, are staff, and it starts to get into the details and the actually functionality of the tool. But there's 6 pillars of a conscious brand, and one of them is higher purpose, and purpose-driven strategy. So how's your purpose actually driving your strategy? Conscious communication. You talked about conscious consumer. Well, conscious communication, which is one of the pillars of conscious capitalism, but conscious communication is, well, how are you communicating this to your consumers? So, again, empathetically connected. So that conscious consumer, how are they empathetically connected to your purpose and your strategy through the conscious communication? And then the next one is intrinsically engaged employees, right? And with these remote workplaces, this is even more important than it was, when we first kicked this off, is how intrinsically engaged are your employees, and how do you know, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and then, those are 5. And then the 6th is, as market conditions shift, as world events shift, how are you being agile and responsive, but still being in line with that purpose, right? And I think that is really, the essence of the value statement of purpose on purpose, right? And, I guess we're helping to activate purpose, but really at the essence, it is purpose on purpose. And I just want to give you an example of, one of these steps, one of many steps that brought us to this point of this software, this tool, was, as we were doing sustainability work and strategies, we're working with some pretty cool brands, some pretty leading thinking, high exited brands that were and did help to shape and co-shape the natural products industry. And I remember some of the those leading brands, other companies would come to us and say, "Oh, you're working with XYZ and XYZ and this one and this one and this one. We want you to come work for us." And those are kind of the cool kid companies, and we want to be part of that cool kid crew. So come do to us what you did for them. And we're like, well, yeah, sure, but like, why? Like, what's the deeper why? Well, because we want to be like that brand. Well,
that's your purpose.
yeah, that's your purpose, right? So we didn't, at the time, we didn't have a tool to be able to assess that readiness of those organizations that wanted to work with us. And it just, and this software tool, the Conscious Brands assessment, really assesses that readiness, and is that alignment there? Like, is there work that needs to happen first before we do a sustainability strategy? Like, maybe there's some purpose work.
Yeah.
So
the Conscious Brands company started out helping other conscious companies really kind of activate their purpose or their sustainability. But then you've shifted into a software, like an assessment tool, that helps brands identify whether they're fulfilling their purpose on purpose, which is amazing. It's like, how did that transition happen though? How did you go from consulting into an assessment tool? And does Conscious Brands, the assessment tool or company, this new version of the company, does it still do consulting as well, or are you doing that outside of Conscious Brands? Very
great questions and well researched, sir. So as I said, in 2017, we kind of saw some of the co-opting of sustainability. We also saw some shifts around the industry, like huge acquisitions were happening, and a lot of those acquisitions were happening to our clients, right? So we were kind of getting pushed to the side as these larger, white wave type brands started to come in, and General Mill type companies started to come in. And which was great for our clients, and we were very happy that we were able to work with them. They're able to have like huge exits. But we also saw that sustainability was being spoken of in a different way, and it still kind of came down to a lot to carbon, and carbon's important, and I think there's some companies doing some great work, but it's not just all, right? And sustainability, what we kind of started to, posit and talk about was, sustainability is just one aspect of what a conscious brand is, right? And that story they shared about, we need to move kind of into something that's a little more flourishing and regenerative, right? And responsive. And we had the fortune of being able to host a conversation in Anaheim at Natural Products Expo West, which, Gage, I know have you attended that? I can't recall.
Partaken in a few of those, yeah.
Yeah. And so we hosted a conversation, and so as opposed to doing like a workshop, we put on an event called Co-Creating an Industry of Conscious Companies, and just put it out, right? And we had about 3.5 hours with 100 plus attendees, and explored, one, we had a posit or a hypothesis of what a conscious brand was, right? And consciousness, if you break it out, if you look at the etymology of it, it's really about knowing, and not just knowing, but knowing together. And as you know, one of our guiding principles is the African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. And so if we're going to evolve as a company, we need to talk to other people. Like, we can't just do it within the walls of the organization. And if we want to evolve as an industry, who are we to kind of say this is how the industry needs to evolve? It needs to be more of a co-creative listening, iterative process. So we hosted this workshop on co-creating an industry of conscious companies. And, our request was no spectators, like everyone is a participant. And we came up with, 1,000+ data points around the enabling and inhibiting aspects of a conscious business, a conscious brand, and just kind of start to, play with some of that language, play with some of that, what we were hearing in the industry. And one of the tools that we employ is something called generative listening. And I know I've talked about this before, just kind of the 4 levels of listening. So the first one is habitual, next one's debative, the third one's empathetic, and the fourth one is generative. And what we mean by generative listening is listening for that future that wants to emerge. And that's what we were doing. We're listening for this future that wanted to emerge. And as we're kind of creating some of this framework and some of these systems conditions and measurements of a conscious brand based on what we posited, as well as feedback from the conversations we were having, both in Anaheim and other places, I was doing some research on the internet, and I came across this Australian company that had created this software called the Conscious Brands Index. And I was like, well, that's interesting. It's consciousbrand.co. So I missed that domain when I registered my domains. But, I reached out to them and said, hey, like we own the trademarks for North America and Europe of conscious brands. We don't own it for Australia. And one of our guiding principles is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. So would you be open to looking at what it means to go further together? And it took a few weeks, but they responded. They said, yeah, sure. Let's do that. So, it's really, so I was talking to some folks in different networking circles. Like, well, I would have just called my lawyer, got my lawyer on it. Like, well, what would your lawyer have done but cost you money, right? Like,
yeah.
Why not be
an
curious?
Opportunity?
Yeah, and potentially an opportunity, right? So anyway, we worked with this company in Australia and tweaked it and tried it and tweaked it some more and tried it and tweaked it some more, and we just kind of came out with this conscious brands assessment tool that helps organizations ensure that their purpose is on purpose. And as we were doing this, we realized that our greatest impact for this tool is not just us owning it in our toolbox and having it proprietary. We were very clear that we didn't want it in assessment, for some of the reasons I shared earlier about things being too busy already and too much out there. So we made some tweaks to make it compatible with the B Corp assessment. And, we've been through some B Corp assessments with clients where we've used the tool. It's actually got the company that's getting certified or recertified more points. So that's pretty cool. And we don't want to own this, right? Like, again, we want to be a community, and we need to, like, there's not one person or one action that's going to make the world a better place. It's everyone doing multiple actions, right? Like, there's no silver bullet or one size fits all that we all want, right? Whether it's this pandemic or whether it's climate change or whether it's, whatever it is, the economy, just put the list. There's no one size fits all, and there's no one solution or one approach, right? So we decided, I guess this would have been earlier this year, as we were just getting ready to do like a full launch, that any of the consulting shouldn't be under the same umbrella as conscious brands. So we kind of created this other little consulting group that does some of the work, but we wanted to make sure that conscious brands had some autonomy and it didn't have like a conflict of interest, that we were offering this service and then saying, oh yeah, here's the 20 things that you should do with us in order to make yourself a more conscious brand, right? And then just having the one that, like this was co-created, this tool. So as it evolves, we need to co-evolve with it and work with other kind of branding, consulting, purpose type of agencies or groups that can put this into their toolbox and use it with their clients. So that's kind of where we're at right now with the pilot is, let's turn into that. Let's tune into all these great stories and use this as a first step in engagement and in working with our clients, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful evolution. I love that story of collaboration, because we hear too many stories of big companies buying up all these trademarks or different things like that, and then pressuring these smaller companies to not be able to use pretty common language. Like a recent version of that is one of the bigger kind of natural product companies trademarked the term always organic and has started sending letters to other companies who have been always organic and using that statement for a long time. But, they don't own the trademark, because like, why would you trademark always organic? It's just a plain statement that most organic companies use, right? But that's just like this weird competitive, like send my lawyer after him kind of model where I much prefer and love what you're doing, where it's more like, hey, let's create this space where we can all evolve and grow together rather than be in competition with one another. For like, it's less of more of an abundance mindset than a scarcity mindset, I think. And I very much appreciate that about your story behind Conscious Brands.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And, and just kind of how we approach this whole, the output of the assessment is unique as well, right? Like we focus on what's working within an organization, or we highlight what's working within an organization rather than pointing out all the things that are wrong, right? And I think it's just, again, if I'm always, I'll use my wife or a friend or whatever example, right? That if I'm always pointing out what's wrong, that's all I'm looking for, right? Like I'm always just looking for something that's wrong, versus like, let's celebrate what's working. Let's celebrate what's right. Let's, like what's great about my life right now, not what sucks about it. And yeah. I think we can start to shift this narrative. And I think regardless of what you think about this current time that we're in right now, with all the craziness and all the shifting and all the whatever, this time last year, both you and I would have been planning for Anaheim. We would be ready to hop on a plane and go. And I know myself and lots of other folks that we haven't traveled for a year now to any conferences. There's actually been a lot more time, and there's kind of this interesting pause. And I think this is a real opportunity for us to rethink and react, maybe not react, but react our roles in the world.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that makes sense. Sort of back to your paperboy days, like use that downtime to kind of do some introspection, really think about where you want to go or what's important to you and so on and so forth, and then have a more purposeful path towards that future.
Exactly. As I'm folding those metaphorical papers of life and putting a rubber band around them and seeing how far up on the step I can throw it. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Sounds like you need to create a newsletter of consciousness, consciousness newsletter of introspective papers that get delivered to your
introspective
inbox daily.
papers. Well, I think I was a little disappointed, Gage, when I heard the title of your podcast that it's not called The Occasional Drip.
That's a whole different show. It's, I can't take ownership of Chewy's words. Inside joke for those listening.
Inside joke, yes. But I think it's I guess my point with that is that it's a real opportunity for us to turn inside to ourselves, right? Without getting too spiritual about it all. But I think we've looked outside so much that now we need to look inside. Let's turn in instead of turning out. And, it kind of brings me to our new mission with Conscious Brands. So I said that our original one that we met, and we were very stoked that we were able to, help 1,000 brands transition or further thrive in the new economy by 2020. Very, very, happy that we met that goal, achieved that goal. And our new one is, inspire and activate 100,000 internal brand believers. And those are people within the organization. So when I talked about looking at what's working within an organization, when a company goes through the Conscious Brands assessment, it not only compares the individual, but it compares the departments and it compares the hierarchy within the organization based on these 6 pillars. And what you get is kind of a look at the alignment and dissonance, but really like where are those people that see what's going on, right? And we call those internal brand believers. And it's again, the hypothesis or what we posit here is that, if we can get those internal brand believers to a certain tipping point of about, and it's not huge, it's like 13% of your organization, we can shift that. So, this is kind of based on the model of the diffusion of innovation, which, there's, what is it, like 2% are the innovators, then there's those early adopters, and then there's this chasm, right? And as that point hits 13%, it just kind of jumps this chasm into the early majority, right? And we've seen this in so many different movements. We've seen this in organic is a great example. Like I think we're again at the top of that early majority of, like, we're not even late majority, but we've gone through those innovators, those early adopters, and it takes time. Like the starting to push and get that momentum, it takes time. But as soon as we get to that one point, that it's kind of that tipping point, and then it just juts up. And so that's really the logic behind focusing on the internal brand believers and focusing on what's working. So what is it that they see within your organization that maybe you don't have your finger on the pulse of? And that's why it's important to kind of turn into your organization and look inward, not just looking outward, right? That empathetically connected customer we can we connect to. But if we don't know who we are, if we don't know how our brand is on purpose, or if it's on purpose, or purpose is on purpose, then how can we be conscious as an organization? So, to inspire and activate 100,000 internal brand believers to help their organizations live into their higher purpose by 2030. So, can I put you down for 20,000, Gage?
Yeah, but 22,000, please. Come on.
22,000. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, so if the listeners want to be part of that 100,000 along with me and my 20,000,
well, 22.
Where do they go?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, what I would say is, there's a free assessment online at consciousbrands.com. But what we're really our focus is, and I know that your listening community, Gage, is both brands and then brand consultants in varying capacities, mission-based, purpose-driven organizations that they work with. And it's really those organizations that we want to work with, and we want this tool to be in their toolboxes. So we're just working through a bit of a pilot group. and sorting out what that program looks like. And we'll be starting to do some training kind of, if I'm being optimistic, I'll say July, but if I'm being realistic, it's September. We have some data governance just to finalize some fees. But, just to become an accredited conscious brand ambassador. Yeah. So.
Okay, that makes sense. So this episode will launch before then. So is there room in that pilot program? Are you looking for more people, or is that already full?
Yeah, we have about 3 organizations. We have room for a few more. I'd like to kind of put it at 8, and we could probably do a couple working groups. Again, it is that going further together and that co-creating and understanding the needs and the values, because we have blind spots, right? And we're looking to the community to help us see those blind spots and offer them a tool that they can use for their clients. And that a tool, that part of this pilot program is not only us like figuring out the training, but then we're giving you the tool that you can have for your clients for free, which would otherwise be a cost.
That's beautiful. So listeners out there, if you want to participate in this pilot program and help go further together, I guess, hit Rob up at Conscious Brands. You can find some contact info there, I assume, or find him on LinkedIn. Wherever we publish this episode, we'll publish links as well to Conscious Brands, anything else mentioned in this episode, as well as Rob's LinkedIn, so you can reach out to him. Beyond that, I know you are still doing some activating sustainability, or maybe moving into activating regenerativeness through consulting. So if somebody wants to reach out to you through that to help, with any sticky issues they're dealing with around activating their purpose, where would they go?
I think I'm trying to just keep the sign on the door, Conscious Brands, as to not over confuse.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, the name of the consulting group's the Imaginal Collective. And really it's the idea that we need to imagine all our impacts. So the first step in anything we do is the Conscious Brands assessment tool. And then we start looking at, what that means. If a company wants to work with us, I would say you need to ask yourself why you want to work with us. And I don't want to be arrogant or anything, but why do you want to work with me? Yeah. Let's see if you can get you into the club. But
sell me. Yeah.
But really, I'm at a place in my career that I want to make sure the work that I'm doing is meaningful and impactful. And yeah, if you don't know why you want to work with us, we can have a conversation for that, around that. But I'm not, and I don't know. There's just a lot of energy, I think, that gets wasted and is inefficient if you're not clear on that why you want to work with us and why you want to kind of imagine all the impacts that you have. So. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Well, appreciate you coming out, spending a little time with us on Evolve CPG and sharing your, what were we calling it? Wisdom, brilliance, ideas, insights with the world. So thank you again for doing all that you do and for sharing it with us.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to, maybe thank my mother for getting me that paper when I was 11.
It all started there.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun, Gage.
Beautiful.
And, I really appreciate you and all that you're doing, and acknowledge your courageous leadership to always look at ways to go further together. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Rob, his company, and the assessment tool, go to consciousbrands.com. Subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel for more innovator interviews, expert advice, and leadership discussions. If you like this episode, hit that like button and share it with your colleagues. And of course, send us feedback and ideas for who we should talk to next at evolve@modernspecies.com. and learn about our new online community at evolvecpg.com. See you next week.